I'm meteorologist Peter Chan, and welcome to the Alaska Weather Show on this Thursday, July 22nd, 2021. I'll be your host this evening, and if you ever want additional weather information, you can always go online at weather.gov/Alaska, or you can call for a recorded phone forecast at 1-800-472-0391. Well, in the weather headlines on this Thursday afternoon, we continue to have red flag warnings in effect through late evening up there across east central areas, and they will be once again in effect for Friday afternoon and evening. And this time on Friday, the Fairbanks area will also be included. I'll highlight that in a moment. We're going to have some enhanced precipitation moving across southeast and south central areas overnight and Friday into early Saturday as a couple of easterly waves propagate westward. And then the Gulf low is going to slowly weaken and drift further south-southeast into the northern Pacific, but the frontal band that's going to be spinning up into northward up into the southeast panhandle will bring some periods of rain here Friday before tapering off over the weekend. And we've had a satellite outage that goes what we call geostationary environmental satellite. 17 has experienced a data outage today, so we do not have any of the normal satellite loops that we typically show you. But make up for that with some other things. And taking a look at where we have warnings in effect, red flag warnings are in effect for the Yukon Flats and the surrounding highlands, as well as down through Eagle and Northway for this evening until midnight. And then Fairbanks' area has been included. All those areas, again, under the gun for the potential for scattered thunderstorms that could cause lightning strikes that are enhancing the fire danger. So that's why we have the red flag warnings there this afternoon and again tomorrow. And tomorrow, again, including the Fairbanks area. And we can see where the greatest potential for significant fire exists, and it's across east central areas, the L indicating lightning induced and the red indicating the high risk. As far as things should improve a bit on Saturday, thunderstorm coverage will not be nearly as widespread, and temperatures will cool by several degrees because readings this afternoon and again on Friday will be back up into the lower to mid 80s across portions there, especially of the Yukon Flats. Now we have kind of an interesting weather feature that from time to time does impact the state, and we have a couple of easterly waves. I highlighted those by going to the 500 millibar chart. That's about 10,000 feet up. This is situated on the time frame for 10 p.m. this Thursday evening. We have the low pressure situated over the Gulf of Alaska, and then we have a mid and upper level high located there in the northeast part of the state along the Alcan border. And kind of going between the two circulations, we have these little impulses that ride through. They have some moisture with them. So on the right side of your screen, you can see the surface low pressure map there showing the low over the Gulf. And the area of enhanced precipitation along the Alcan border extending westward along the Alaska range. And some of these areas of rain, it could come down pretty good along the Alaska range. Some of the smaller streams could see some minor flooding because rainfall amounts, especially the slopes that are easterly facing, could pick up an inch or two of rainfall. It doesn't take much to make some of those smaller streams respond and rise rather quickly. And that moisture will be working its way westward overnight into Friday morning to include the Talkeetna Mountains. Anywhere along and south of the Alaska range, we will see the precipitation enhanced by a couple of these features. So today's weather map shows the low out over the Gulf, just sitting and spinning there, but it's eventually going to drift slowly toward the south-southeast into the northern Pacific as we go through the weekend. We have a thermal low sitting out over the Yukon Flats area, and that's serving to provide some instability to get those scattered thunderstorms going through the late afternoon and evening hours. And then back up there toward the Chukchi Sea, we have a low that's nearly stationary, and it continues to weaken. Overnight, we'll see that easterly wave work its way further across the southern interior, south of the Alaska range, and bringing an enhanced area of rain, maybe an isolated rumble of thunder. And the low remains along the Gulf there with a frontal band of rain moving inland northward along the southeast panhandle as we head through the overnight and into Friday morning. And then the low over the Chukchi Sea just kind of slowly weakens. For Friday, not much change in the scenario. The low up there in the northeast is kind of below the mid and upper level high pressure because it's a thermal low where the warmer temperatures are, and we'll see scattered thunderstorms redeveloping with the enhanced fire risk to lightning strikes across south central areas again Friday afternoon and evening. Rains lighter should continue along portions of the south central coast, especially the eastern Kenai down into Kodiak Island. And then we just see any precipitation out over the west will be a bit less, it kind of diminish along with just areas of fog out over the Bering. And on Saturday, there could actually be some sunshine along portions of the lower and middle Yukon valleys, so places like McGrath may approach 70 again after some rather dreary weather this week with the cloud cover and periods of rain, and still a few showers and areas of fog continuing there, the North Bering Strait on up toward the lower Chukchi Sea, and then a weak area of low pressure passing through the central Aleutians, producing some areas of light rain and fog. So low temperatures Friday morning will be generally in the low to mid 50s across the southeast panhandle, and lower 50s across much of the southeast or south central areas rather. And then during the day on Friday, with cloud cover and rain moving in across the southeast, highs will be confined to the upper 50s to near 60 at best. And as we get across south central areas, there'll still be the rain coming down. Talkeetna, 67, might be a little ambitious. 70 there at McGrath, perhaps, but I think a little better chance as we get into Saturday if we can get some breaks open up west of the Alaska Range across the southwest interior. And then temperatures for Saturday morning, lower 50s across the southeast. Generally lower 50s, upper 40s to lower 50s across much of south central areas, and high temperatures on Saturday should generally be in the lower 60s across the inner canals there of the southeast, and generally holding in the lower 60s for south central areas, but further west getting back up into the 60s. Across the northern areas of the state, the Arctic coast could see lows mid 30s to around 40 degrees, but above freezing, and generally lower 40s along the northwest and Seward Peninsula coast. And the interior, Yukon Flats, 57 for a low there at Fort Yukon. It'd be rather mild, 59 at Fairbanks. And then scattered thunderstorms redeveloping. Some areas throughout the Yukon Flats could see high temperatures easily back up in the lower 80s, building some of that instability for the scattered showers and storms. And then as we look into Saturday morning, similar pattern, mid 30s to lower 40s along the Arctic coast, lower 40s along the west, and then lows generally in the 50s through the mid and upper Yukon valleys, and high temperatures come Saturday afternoon will be several degrees cooler there, especially through east central areas, and that should help to reduce the fire threat due to lightning strikes, because I don't think the thunderstorm coverage will be quite as widespread on Saturday as it will be on Friday afternoon. And looking out toward the southwest, we have readings generally in the upper 40s to near 50 degrees for lows, and upper 40s across the Aleutian chain. Could approach 70 there, upper Kuskokwim at McGrath, and elsewhere 63 at both Bethel and Aniak. And then as lows Saturday morning will generally be down mid 40s to around 50 degrees across the entire region. And then high temperatures Saturday afternoon, at least across the interior, should generally be back up into the 60s, not quite as dreary or wet of weather as what we experienced through the first half of this week. And we're going to check now the temperature outlook for Sunday, July 28th through, I don't know if I got my date right there, but July 28th through August 1st. August 1st is a Sunday. And temperatures are expected to average above normal across the eastern half of the state and a little bit down into the southeast. Precipitation will be on the drier side along the Alcan border there. Precipitation should average below normal, extending down into the southeast panhandle, whereas we do expect precipitation to average above normal here as we head toward the end of July into early August across the western third of the state, especially centered on the YK deltas on up through the Seward Peninsula.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
It's aviation weather time, and if you have a flight you're planning here Friday into Saturday, main weather features will be an area of low pressure centered on the western half of the Gulf. That feature will gradually sink south-southeastward here as we head into the weekend and gradually diminish. We are watching an easterly wave along the southeastern Alcan border that will be propagating westward along and south of the Alaska Range Thursday night into Friday. And then back up to the northwest, the low that's been over the Chukchi Sea will continue to weaken, with a trough remaining from the northwest through east central areas, and that will serve as a focal point for some isolated scattered thunderstorms, especially the eastern Brooks Range down through the Yukon Flats and just north of the Alaska Range on Friday afternoon. Area of showers that will be passing westward with perhaps some isolated thunder there along and south of the Alaska Range. And look for IFR conditions hanging off of the southwest coast there, including Nunivak Island. But as we go through Saturday morning, there'll be areas of IFR as a frontal band lifts northeastward up into portions of south central and the southeast panhandle, with another round of rain there over much of the southeast panhandle. Areas of IFR lingering on the northwest portion, the northwest coast and western north slope, and then continuing off of the southwest coast back into the central and western Aleutians. For Saturday afternoon, we should still see some areas of IFR around the eastern Kenai, Prince William Sound, eastward toward Yakutat, and then also along the Arctic coast around Dead Horse, Prudhoe Bay, and along the western extent of the Seward Peninsula down to Nunivak Island and into a good part of the Bering. So past conditions on Friday at Anaktuvuk, we'll see VFR conditions prevail, but an isolated thunderstorm could pop up in the afternoon or early evening. That'll also be the case at Atigun, general VFR, but an isolated storm possible in the afternoon or evening, and especially if you're flying east of those locations. Lake Clark and Merrill should see MVFR conditions improve to VFR later morning and afternoon. And the same trend at Rainy Pass, MVFR becoming VFR. And Windy Pass, that should hold on to general MVFR conditions. Again, that eastern wave will be bringing a round of showers, maybe even isolated thunder embedded within that. Isabel will also see MVFR conditions during the day on Friday, as will Mentasta, and there could be an isolated thunderstorm develop in the vicinity there at Mentasta Pass. As we go a little further south and west, Tanita should see VFR conditions become MVFR. And right now, Portage should generally hold on to MVFR conditions, though certainly some IFR conditions will likely develop as you fly further east across Prince William Sound, especially later in the day. And then Chilkoot and White on the north end of the southeast panhandle should generally hold on to MVFR conditions, where flying further south and southeastward through the middle and lower portion of the panhandle, you will encounter IFR conditions. So freezing levels are still generally above 10,000 feet along the Alcan border in east central areas. They do fall off back to around 8,000 feet along the west coast, and then as you head out through the Aleutians, they rise back up 12 to 14,000 feet from the central into the western Aleutians. Best chance for icing will be in areas associated with that low pressure circulation in the Gulf, extending up into portions of the southeast. That would be the central and southern portions of the southeast panhandle, and along and just east of Kodiak Island. That easterly wave will have potential for some icing with the precipitation area that's working its way westward along and south of the Alaska Range. And then an area of icing between 9 and 16,000 feet possible there, especially up through the northwest areas of the western Brooks Range and western North Slope. Low pressure circulation shows up at jet stream level, 30,000 feet over the Gulf, and the one that's up over the Chukchi Sea will continue to wind down as we drop down to 9,000 feet onshore flow, southwesterly upwards to 40 knots into western the British Columbia coast. And on the backside of the low there near Kodiak Island, northeasterly to 35 knots. And then the circulation continues to show up there, the western portion of the Gulf of Alaska, the backside, northeasterly winds to 40 knots just off of Kodiak Island. And there will be the potential for some areas of turbulence in parts of the southern southeast panhandle, as well as south central areas east of Prince William Sound, and down along Kodiak Island and to the tip of the Alaska Peninsula, generally between surface and 4,000 feet.
Hola, observadores de estrellas. Trace here. How many times have you been looking at the sky and thought every point of light that you can see is moving in a different direction and at a different velocity? It's amazing, really. For example, Saturn will be in conjunction with the moon at the end of this week, so let's watch the planet's progress. Hit the skies around midnight every night this week and look south. On the right, you'll see the waxing gibbous moon, and on the left is Saturn, and Jupiter is even further left. Check again each night and you'll see the moon approaching the planets. Saturn is the furthest planet we can see with our naked eye. It takes 30 years to orbit the sun once, and on August 1st we'll be at opposition. That's when it's closest to Earth and brightest for us. Watch the planets night after night to really get to know the sky and keep looking up.
Tsunamis are a big threat not only to Alaska but around the Pacific because we have a lot of really big fault lines, and when they move in big earthquakes, they often move the water around them, and that's what causes tsunamis. I am Summer Ohlendorf, and I'm the science officer at NOAA's National Tsunami Warning Center in Palmer, Alaska. Alaska's main tsunami threat is from the subduction zone that lays along the southern end of the state. When an earthquake happens underneath the ocean at one of these subduction zones, the edge of one of the tectonic plates ends up kind of flipping up as stress is released at that plate boundary. And when it flips up, it pushes up the water that sits on top of it, and it moves a whole lot of water all at once. And that water all then becomes part of the tsunami wave. Just like when you throw a rock into a pond, you get a series of ripples that head outward from where the rock landed. Tsunami waves travel outward from the disturbance caused by the earthquake. And that means you can get multiple waves, and they're really long waves that can last for hours. Tsunami waves can be hundreds of miles long from one crest to the next crest. And that means that those crests, or the tops of the two waves, can come in 20 minutes apart to an hour apart. In the deep ocean, tsunami waves are actually usually pretty small. They can be anywhere from a few centimeters to maybe a meter, depending on how far offshore you are. As tsunami waves approach the coast, they kind of pile up on each other, and the energy gets compressed, so they grow in size and they slow down a lot as the wave is squeezed into a smaller space. If you're standing on the beach and a tsunami may be coming, you may hear strange noises like an approaching freight train. You may also see water being sucked away from the shore much further than it would for a low tide, and much faster. And sometimes you can hear things like rattling of sand and rocks. So just being alert for any strange ocean behavior and strange noises is always a good idea when you're near the coast. Most likely you're not going to see something like a huge 100-foot breaking wave as a tsunami approaches. It's probably going to look something more like a step of water that's maybe a few feet high, or just a turbulent mass of water. And it may not be very big, but it's going to be moving pretty fast, and it's going to be probably carrying a lot of debris with it. Even what we think of as small tsunamis can be really dangerous because they're associated with a lot of energy and a lot of fast-moving water. The National Tsunami Warning Center is part of NOAA and the National Weather Service. At the Tsunami Warning Center, we're monitoring streams from seismic data and sea level data 24/7 every day of the year. So the seismic data tells us how the Earth is moving, it tells us when there are earthquakes, and using that data we can figure out where the earthquakes are, how big they are, and how deep they are, which tells us something about the tsunami hazard from those quakes. So as far as monitoring water levels, there's something called the DART system. That stands for Deep Ocean Assessment and Reporting of Tsunamis. And what those are little stations where there's a pressure sensor on the ocean floor and a buoy anchored nearby. The way it knows the difference between a normal ocean swell and a tsunami is mostly because of the wavelength. And when we look at the signal from a DART system, we can see those big long waves and distinguish them from other smaller transient waves. Our system of coastal tide gauges is also distributed worldwide and all across the ocean basins. And what these end up telling us is what the tsunami wave is doing at the coastline. We send out an information statement when there's an earthquake near one of our coastlines that doesn't pose a tsunami hazard. We also have the tsunami watch that may be issued for a faraway earthquake that has the potential to impact one of our coastlines. A tsunami warning is our most serious level, and that is the case where we would want people to evacuate from the coastline. If you hear a tsunami warning, you'll want to evacuate from that hazard zone to travel to a safe shelter, or just anywhere that's inland or higher ground outside of the hazard zone. Ahead of time, you'll want to think about where to go, what to take, and how you'll communicate with your friends and family members once you get there. It's important to remember that during a tsunami evacuation, a lot of people are going to be crowded onto the same routes trying to evacuate. During a tsunami warning, you may hear about it over the TV and radio, an alert on your cell phone. You can also see tsunami information directly on our website, www.tsunami.gov. And we're also on Facebook and Twitter, where we issue our alerts during the event.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Well, in the marine weather segment now, we'll see how the sea ice edge is shaping up. There is a little feature there, a thumb of ice that's kind of crept out into the lower Chukchi Sea from off the Russian coast, but that's been about it as far as any notable ice movement. We'll continue to see an area of low pressure situated over the lower Chukchi Sea just sit there and spin and gradually weaken as we head through the Friday and into early Saturday. And little in the way of significant ice movement, and the melting will continue as we are now at the peak here of the summer season. And taking a look at what we have across the southeast panhandle, with the low pressure that's situated west there out over the centered over the western Gulf, we do have winds that will be out of the south-southeast along the inner canals of the southeast with winds of 15 knots and waves a few feet or so. Out along the coast of the Gulf there, we're looking at winds 15 knots from the south, Craig to Sitka with waves of 6 feet, but picking upwards from the southeast and east, Yakutat westward at 25 knots and seas of 9 feet. Then on Saturday, wind should come down a bit, still from the south-southeast across the inner canals at 10 to 15 knots, waves 2, maybe 3 feet. And then from the south-southeast along the length of the Gulf Coast there with waves 4 or 5 feet. And then across south-central areas on Friday, you can see on the backside of the low, winds are out of the east-northeast, still upwards around 25 knots with 8 to 9 foot waves off of the Kenai and off of Kodiak. But they come a little more mixed or variable there across the Cook Inlet at around 10 to 15 knots, waves 2 to 3 feet, and northerly at 15 knots with 2 foot waves in Prince William Sound. Saturday, winds can come down even farther out over the open waters there of the Gulf, generally out of the east at 15 knots, waves around 5 feet. Variable winds 10 knots in Prince William Sound, waves a couple of feet. And then a little bit more of out there through Cook Inlet, we should see winds with a southerly component of 15 to near 20 knots and waves 3 to 4 feet. Across the Alaska Peninsula and Kodiak Island on Friday, the low center is situated southeast there of Kodiak Island. Backside of it, north-northwest winds to 20 knots, waves 5 feet, Shelikof Strait, but 7 to 8 feet maybe there off of Kodiak Island, and then northwesterly 15 to 20 knots and 3 to 4 foot waves on the Bering side. Winds will come down further there, especially on the Bering side at 10 to 15 knots, waves a few feet. And still northeasterly winds maybe upwards to 20 knots off of Kodiak Island with 6 foot waves. Across the eastern Aleutians for Friday, winds mixed bag, variable 10 to 15 knots, waves around 4 feet. As you get further west from Atka, westward through Adak and Kiska, winds will be 15 to 20 knots from the southwest and waves maybe 4 to 6 feet. Picking up a little bit on Saturday there near Kiska and Adak, upwards to 30 knots from the southwest. Otherwise, the eastern Aleutians start out variable at 10 knots and waves only a couple feet there outside of Dutch Harbor. Going up along the west coast, winds somewhat variable there off of the west coast north of Nunavik Island and around St. Paul and St. George, waves only 3 to 4 feet with onshore westerly winds of 10 to 15 knots and 3-footers there north of Hooper Bay on up into Norton Sound. And then across the region, a little bit more of a south-southwest component sets up for Saturday at around 15 knots or so, waves 3 to 4 feet, St. Paul and St. George on up toward St. Matthew. And coming into Norton Sound, waves a few feet there as well. Along the Arctic coast, winds will be out of the east at 20 knots. And areas down along Kotzebue Sound on up toward Cape Lisburn will have onshore flow from the west extending down along the Seward Peninsula with waves 3-4 feet in the lower Chukchi Sea and through the Bering Strait. And then on Saturday, a little bit of conflicting winds there out of the east, 30 knots at Kaktovik, but areas along the northwest coast and going down through the west end of the Seward Peninsula, winds will be picking up from the south 20 to 25 knots and waves generally around 4 or 5 feet from St. Lawrence Island northward through the strait into the lower Chukchi Sea. And on the weather maps, we have that low pressure sitting southeast of Kodiak Island tonight into the day on Saturday. That will slowly sink south-southeastward into the North Pacific as the low weakens over the lower Chukchi Sea. So that does it for the show tonight. I'll be back tomorrow with more Alaska weather.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.